Today we continue our study of church growth. Today I want to look at misconceptions about church growth and evangelism. Welcome back. This is Steve Good, your instructor. You're doing well in the class, and I hope that you're learning some things that will be helpful for you in your ministry. Today's session will be some questions and answers that I have selected from the field of church growth. There are certain ideas floating around out there that we need to examine. For example, if you follow the right model, will you grow as a church? Are most churches reaching those who are unchurched prior to attending your church? Is the best way to grow a church to follow the Willow Creek or the Saddleback model? Do you have to have a large staff to be able to reach out and to have a growing church? Do most of the unchurched visitors return after they come to your church and visit? Or what about the person who comes 5 or 6 times? Are they going to stay? We will examine these ideas and more in our session today. I have adapted some of the material for this lesson from the Society of Church Consulting. Now, what will you learn? You will learn how to understand the unchurched. It's important for us, if we're going to reach the unchurched, to know something about them. You will learn 12 misconceptions about church growth and evangelism among the unchurched, coming from their perspective. And then from John Piper, you will see a video where he talks about church growth. It is not always inevitable, predictable, and constant. And then last, we'll look at the surprising attitude of the unchurched toward the church. Now let's get started. If you're not already acquainted with George Barna, let me share an introduction of him to you. George Barna is a graduate of Boston College. He holds 2 master's degrees from Rutgers University, and he also has a doctorate from Dallas Baptist University. He is the founder of the Barna Group, a market research firm specializing in studying the religious beliefs and behaviors of Americans. Today we're going to be looking at a book he has written entitled Grow Your Church from the Inside Out. In this book he deals with several issues that are crucial for our understanding of how to reach unchurched people. Now I want to talk about 2 different questions here as we begin to move through this slide. Number 1, does successful ministry to the unchurched depend upon following the right model? Well, evangelism must become a lifestyle, not a procedure. So don't just copy a formula from someone else. Just adding a contemporary service or removing all language and music that sounds like the King James Version isn't going to make your church evangelistic. The church will have to develop a servant mind culture within the church itself, not simply institute the latest outreach program. For this lifestyle to be embraced by the church, it must be modeled by the pastoral staff. If the heart of the people in the church are to become passionate about reaching unchurched people, that is where the pastor's heart will be personal. Number 2, the question is, do the attitudes of the unchurched toward the church and community pose a big problem? No, it really doesn't. What surprised Barna was to discover that most of the unchurched were more favorable toward church than the churched felt kindly toward the unchurched. Most Christians, according to Barna, walk around thinking their unsaved friends are automatically hostile toward their own belief system. Barna says the churched people are the ones with the problem, not the unchurched people. People are looking for answers and are more open-minded than we think. In the next slide, you will see a cartoon that helps illustrate this very point. Barna says in Grow Your Church from the Outside In, I quote, "The people with the attitude problem are more likely to be the churched Christians," unquote. Notice this cartoon. Now, while the instruments play, please shake hands with 2 people who aren't in your clique. At times, that represents us well. Even today, you will still hear the buzzword, seeker-sensitive service. Well, the question is, are seeker services a must? Willow Creek Church in South Barrington, Illinois, popularized the notion of having a weekend service specifically geared to attract and help unchurched people. While the model contains some elements of a typical worship service, most notably prayer and a teaching time, however, these have been refined to eliminate the expectations that an unchurched person would worship a God that he or she does not know. Instead, the service is developed to expose the person to the relevance of the Bible, to positive thoughts about Christianity, to the friendliness of church people, and to an environment in which the unchurched feel welcome, comfortable, and helped. What surprised Barna was to find that among the sampling of congregations that were most effective in reaching the unchurched, few offered a seeker service. Instead, most offered full-blown worship services. However, they were cleansed of Christian jargon. I call it Christianese. They didn't have pipe organs or formal dress and traditional symbols, although symbols in worship are on the rebound. What is important to these churches reaching the unchurched are the issues of comfortableness, understanding, authenticity, and education. These are more important than copying any format. And then question number 4. Is the best way to attract the unchurched through large-scale events? About half the churches in Barna's study use large-scale events to attract the lost. Some are finding these large events are often counterproductive, however, to the lifestyle orientation described in the Bible. The church must become more missional, and that comes individually with the members. Among those churches that did use large-scale events, most admit the events simply help them establish a presence with the people of the community. Number 5. Is the route to success to copy Willow Creek or Saddleback? It's hard to argue with success. Everyone wants a piece of Willow or Saddleback, and we forget the importance of the demographics, where they're located. The better approach is to be eclectic. That is, borrow or steal from anyone, but make sure it complements the demographic profile of your church's community. Here are 3 more questions that expose 3 unfortunate misconceptions. Number 6. If you do it right, will most new members come from among the unchurched? Nationally, less than 20% of all church growth comes through conversion. For most churches, numerical growth via births to members of the congregation or transfers from other churches make up the predominant number of additions. Previously unchurched in the very best evangelistic churches will reach no more than 40 to 50%. Question number 7. Will most of the unchurched visitors return? Churches, like people, hate rejection. So we long to be accepted and chosen the very first time. Barna's research suggests that the best of the best will maybe keep 30% of the first-time guests. Most will not return. Number 8. Does ministry to the unchurched require a large staff? A large staff often flies in the face of Ephesians chapter 4 and rarely offers the church body significant responsibility in the building of the kingdom. A pastor to the unchurched often means that the church need not take on that responsibility. This is one of those places where the church will always be in tension to find the proper balance between hiring paid quote-unquote professionals to do ministry and equipping the laity. Here are 2 additional questions to examine. Number 9. The unchurched require anonymity. When they are ready to get involved, will they tell you? Well, usually it is true that they will tell you, but effective churches are motivating an earlier response from the visitors, from the prospects. Barna says, again I quote, "The key to success is not the actual steps taken, but the tone of communication. These churches do not engage in an intensive play for warm bodies, but an energetic effort to let unchurched individuals know what is available to them and the process and implications of making a deeper commitment." Close quote. Question number 10. If an unchurched person comes 5 or 6 times, will he or she stay for good? Well, it sounds good, but it probably doesn't really work. The key is not attendance, but involvement. When a person finds a point of connection, maybe a class or program to attend, a means of serving, a new friend, then he or she is more likely to feel part of the church. Relationships are forming. Building relationships is absolutely pivotal to reaching the unchurched. We come to the last 2 questions for this section. Does success in reaching the unchurched depend upon the pastor's personality and preaching? Actual research tells us that the attitude and spiritual commitment levels of the people in the church is more important than the preaching and the care of the pastor. This does not mean that preaching and teaching is not important. It is at the highest priority level. However, outsiders, the unchurched, will notice how the people treat each other and how they treat them. And that will be, on a Sunday morning, perhaps equally as important as the preaching. Question number 12. Once you start attracting the unchurched, is the challenge simply managing the flow of the incoming people? Well, momentum in the church, as in any organization, is very fragile. And momentum is no guarantee of future success. The larger issue is expanding the base of leadership and raising the resources necessary to keep the ministry moving forward. One pastor found that when his church grew exponentially in a short period of time, it placed an incredible strain on the ministry of the church. He said, and I quote, "I have an awfully tough time trying to find enough mature believers to mentor or teach or serve newcomers. Coming into this, I knew that it would be tough to balance the resource mix, and even then, I really underestimated what it takes." Growth is hard work, but hopefully answers to some of these questions will help you as you design your church to reach out and to touch the unchurched people of your community.